Transaction data loading from SAP RY3 into SAP BW 7.3 using business content data sources, info cubes, info sources, info objects, queries. Here we are using a BW 3.5 navigation method. The transaction codes required for this example is BIW, RSA9, RSA5, RSA6, RSA3, SE11, SE16, RSA1, RSA11, RSA13, RSA14, RSDS, RSD1, RSDIO BCM, RSMO, list cube, RSPC, BWCCMS, RRMX, RSA7, RSORBCT, RSORMDR. Let's check it out. What are the navigations required for this example? We have to make sure that the master data is loaded successfully and log on to SAP RY3 ERP system. Transfer or activate application components using a transaction code RSA9. Activate and install the required data sources. Check the data in the data source using extractor checker by using a transaction code RSA3 or RSA6. Log on to SAP BW 7.3 and perform the SAP BW 3.5 navigation by using the transaction code RSA1 Volt. Then check for RY3 source system connection and replicate the data source, the metadata. Check for the data source. Assign info source to data source or data source to info source. Activate and install the relevant info cube from the business content. Check for the installation. Create update rules to info cube using info source. Show the data flow. Create info package and load data with full update. Monitor the data using transaction code RSMO. Check in the underlying dictionary tables. Check the data in the underlying dictionary tables like PSA or InfoCube fact or dimension tables. Then monitor the data using transaction code RSMO. Then create BEX query on top of InfoCubes. This is the navigation which we are going to follow here. Let's do the navigations. So here we need to enter your master data first. So let's go to SAP BW 7. Okay, so we need to make sure that the master data is loaded. Now I'm going to enter the master data from the scratch for this example. Let's enter the transaction code RSA13. Okay, so it will go to the source system. Make sure that your source system is connected properly. So for that you have to select your source system, right click, select check. It will show you the message source system connection is okay. Okay, so now what we have to do, we have to create the info objects. Select info objects. To create info objects we need info area. So select your info object root node, right click on this, say create info area. Enter your info area name here. Let's enter the info area name here. It's class 25 here. This is for extracting data from RY3. So our info area is ready here. Now let's create an info object catalog for your master data. Right click on your info area, select create info object catalog. Here we're creating an info object catalog for the characteristics. Select the info object type as a characteristic. Enter the info object catalog name. Enter your info object catalog as IOC. We are creating, this is for the class 25, so SID 25, info object catalog or characteristic info object catalog for SID 25. Since we are creating this, so we have to be selected by cus generated the system type. Press enter. It will be selected as a cus generated by the user because it's created by the SAP BW developer or consultant. Once it's selected, click on create button. Let's activate this. Our info object catalog has been activated successfully. Now it's ready to create info objects. Go back. Select your info object catalog. Right click. Select create info object. Enter the characteristic name. So I am creating a salesman ID here. Enter the long description. Click on continue. Select the data type as characteristics. The length is 4 characters. Click on master data or text tab. Here I am not creating any text tables. I am not using any text data here. So you can uncheck this option. So it will not create any text tables for this master data. So for this salesman ID, I need to create attributes for this characteristic, right? So let's select attributes tab. Now create the attributes for salesman ID. So what are the attributes we require? Salesman name, age, address and phone number. Okay, so let's create salesman name. Click on continue. Long description. Salesman name, the data type, characters, the length 10 characters. Click on continue. The same way, in a similar way, let's create a attributes, remaining attributes. We need salesman age. Enter the long description, salesman age, the data type, the numeric, the length should be 2 digits for age. Click on continue. Salesman address, the data type characteristics, the length should be 10 characters. Click on continue. And we require a salesman phone number. The data type should be numerics, 10 digits. So our attributes are ready now. Let's activate this. Continue. Okay, now our objects are ready. It's activated successfully. Go back and we need to create one more for product ID. Right click on your characteristic info object catalog, select create info object, say PID 25 product ID, press enter and click on master and data text. I don't want to create any text table for this, so uncheck this option, and we are not creating any attributes for this. Come back to the general tab, select the data type characters, the length 4 digits, activate. Your info object for product ID is created and activated successfully. Click on back. So we have all the info objects created for the master data loading. Okay, let's create the data source for the master data. Click on the data sources. We need to create application component for the master data. Right click on the root node, select create application component, enter your application component name, SID 25, extracting data from R/3, continue. So I got my application component for master data. Right click, say create data source, enter your data source name for the master data, select the data type source name as it's a master data attributes, select master data attributes, transfer. Okay, now let's enter the short description. Short, medium and long description. This is a data source for master data SID 25, right? Click on extraction tab, and we are loading this from the flat file. So browse and choose your flat file. This is my master data attributes flat file. Select it. Header rows to be ignored 1. The format is going to be CSV. Data separator, comma. Click on proposal tab. Click on load example data. And now click on the fields tab. Let's map the fields with your flat file. So these are the flat file fields. Now we're going to map these fields with our info objects which we have been created, right? So what is my salesman ID? SID 25, and salesman name 25, salesman age, address, phone number. So these are the info objects I have mapped with flat file fields. Click on the preview button. You can check it out. There is a button called read preview data. Before clicking on this, let's activate this data source. Now the data source is creating a structure here and PSA table. You can observe on the bottom of the screen you have a status bar here. It's creating a PSA table. Fine, my data source is activated successfully. Let's click on this read preview data where I can check the master data. My data source has been created successfully. Let's move to create the target for this master data. Click on back, click on info provider, select your application component, your info area. This is my info area created for the info objects. Right click on it, select insert characteristic as info provider. So I'm making that my characteristic SID 25 as an info provider, as a data target for the master data. Click on continue. If you observe here, it comes along with the attributes. These are the attributes which we have been created, right? So let's create a transformation for the attributes. Select your attributes icon here, right click, say create transformation. So the object type is going to be data source, and what is my data source name? ds underscore md sid 25, and my source system is going to be PC. Continue. This is my transformation. It's automatically mapped with the fields since we have entered this mapping information in the data source creation time. So it will automatically mapped here. In case if it is not mapped here, if you don't enter the data source mapping fields, then it won't be displayed the mapping details. So we have to do the manual process here. Since we already mapped there, it's showing now, it's connected with each other. So if you want to see the rule type here, if you double click on this, it will show you the rule type is direct assignment. Okay, click on cancel now. So let's activate this transformation. So transformation is activated successfully. Now click on back. Now let's move to create info package. Select your data source. If you check your data source, it still shows a dot here. When you click on refresh, you can see the transformation under this. You can check it out, the transformation here. This is the transformation we have created. Now let's create info package. Select your data source, right click, select create info package, enter the info package name, info package for SID 25 master data. Select your data source, click on save. Your info package is created. Check it out in an extraction tab. The file name, the path, from where the flat files is located, and check it out, everything is perfectly fine or not. Click on processing tab, check it out, it's only PSA. Then directly click on schedule, click on start. So now the data will be moved from the flat files to your SAP BW PSA tables. So the data has been requested here. So if you want to check it out whether the data moved to BW system or not, click on the monitor icon. Select your request. Click on PSA maintenance icon. The number of records. Continue. This is the master data which moved to your PSA. Go back. Still your info package is not activation mode. So what you have to do is click on refresh. Now it will be in a active status. So what is the next step? You have to create the DTP for your data source. Right click on your data source, select create data transfer process. Check it out, the data DTP type is standard. Continue. Now the extraction mode should be full upload. Click on execute. The execute button is not active here. So what you need to do, you have to activate the DTP. Click on activate. Okay, now the execute button is available. Click on execute. Once you click on this monitor icon, you can see that here the result will shows that your DTP. So if you want to check that whether the data has been moved to DTP or not, select administer data target icon. It shows this manage info provider. This is a request ID for to move the data, and you can check the icon here. It shows that request available for reporting. So the data is moved to DTP and it is available for reporting, and it shows how many records has been transferred, how many records added to the DTP. So this is your target table. So our target is nothing but our info object salesman ID. So this is your data target here. Select it, click on contents. Now click on execute. This is your master data has been loaded to your DTP. That is your data target. So now we have loaded the master data successfully. So we have the master data available. So what is our next step here? We have to load the transaction data from SAP R/3 system, right? So let's do the navigation for R/3. Click on back. Okay, now we need to open the R/3 system. This is your SAP R/3. So first step here, it's going to be we have to transfer or activate your application component hierarchy. So what is the transaction code? RSA9. It shows, do you want the content application transfer the component hierarchy? You have to click on yes. Okay, so once you click on yes, so this is a one-time activity which we have to transfer the component hierarchy. You have to click on yes. Otherwise we have one more transaction code. Let's check it out. Click on cancel. Now enter the transaction code SBIW. You can check it out on the status bar. It's start of application. It's open display IMG screen here. So IMG stands for implementation guide. So you need to expand the business content data sources. You have here transfer application component hierarchy here. You have to execute this. Click on execute. Again it will reach to the previous screen which we enter RSA 9, right? So here you have to select yes. You have two different transaction codes for this. Either you can enter RSA 9 or SBIW. Click on S. Remember this is a one-time activity. You don't require to do every time. Okay, now the application component hierarchy was transferred from the content. Go back. Now we have to activate the required data sources, right? So we have to activate and install the required data sources. So what is the transaction code for this? RSA5. Press enter. It will take to the installation of data source from the business content. This is a page it will take. So you have one more option. You can cancel this. You have one more transaction code for this. Again SBIW. Press enter. Expand your business content data sources. You have option called transfer business content data source. You have to execute this. It will take to the same again RSA5 page. Okay, so where installation of data source from the business content. Now expand your SAP R/3 and expand your SAP material management. Select the data source 2LIS02 2 LIs underscore 02 underscore S012. This is a purchasing. The data source belongs to the purchasing. If you want to check it out the version comparison here, to know the version comparison, select your data source and click on version comparison here. So it will show that there is no difference found between the versions. There is no difference in between the previous version and this version. So there is no problem in the version comparison. Go back and select your data source. You have an option called activate the data source. Click on activate data source. Click on continue. It shows that action successfully completed. So the major difference in between this version comparison, in case if the data source is not activated, then it will display a message data source does not exist in the version A. So once it is activated, then it will display that no difference found between the versions. This was the message we got in earlier. So it means that our data source has been already activated. So we don't require to activate again, but we press this activate the data source. So you need to find out whether you need to activate the data source or not, or whether it is activated already or not. You have to click on version comparison, check it out the message. If you get no difference found between the versions, it means the data source is already activated, right? So to view this extract structure and its fields, so what you need to do, double click on the data source. So once you double click on the data source, it will display the extract structure. This is the extract structure technical name S02BIWS. The direct access is going to be D. This is the fields is available for this data source. These are the fields is available. So this is the extract structure of the data source which we selected. You can check it out the data source here 2LIS02 is 012, and this is a purchasing data source. And you can check here the delta update is ready for this, and this data source supports the delta updates, and the direct access is a D. It means that the remote access is not possible here. And if you check the data source for the reconciliation, it does not support the reconciliation property, so it is not checked here. Make sure that we have to observe one thing, we cannot do any changes here. Click on back, again back, go back. So the next step is going to be, we have to make sure that the data source entity in the metadata repository of the data source. For this we have to enter the transaction code RSA6. Press enter. Okay, let's go back. We have one more transaction code. It's a SBIW, and we have a post processing data source. Expand it. We have option called edit data source and application component hierarchy. Execute it. You'll come back to the same screen where RSA, the last transaction code which you entered, RSA6 here. So if you want to manage or customize the data source with the existing fields, what you have to do is you have to select your data source and you can change the options here. So for that we need to expand your SAP R/3 and MM module, and this is your data source. You have an option here, change the data source here, continue. Here you have options called fields, which one you want to select, hide, or whether you can select or deselect the fields here. This is the option which you can manage or customize the data source with existing fields. Okay, go back. So now let's do one thing. We are going to check the data in the data source using the extract checker. The transactions codes we are going to use for this RSA3 and RSA6. So go back and type RSA3, where it will take you to extractor checker for is API. So this is a data source, where you're going to check the data in the data source. So what is your data source name here? 2lis_02s012. This is my data source, and I have here update mode is going to be F. It is nothing but full, and we have option called select extraction. This is your start extraction here. Select your start extraction. It will show you this 1009 data records are selected. To display all the records and increase the packet size and number of packets here. Okay, so this is your data records and calls. Right now it's displaying 100. Let's make it as 1000. Okay, then display extraction calls, you can make it as at not 10. You can say, let's say 80, and click on select execute. It shows that it shows more records here. This is how, if you want to display more records, you have to increase your record size and your data display extraction call size, so it will display more records. Now let's select your output list. So if this is a records, the number of records are displaying here. Total it's a 24,507 records has been selected. If you want to check it any one of them, double click on it. It will display the data. This is your transaction data. To export this data into your local files, your Excel files, you have an option called a spreadsheet icon here. If you click on that one, you can start exporting into your local files. Okay, you can select the format. What is the format it's required here, and select the format. It's a Microsoft Excel, and if you click on yes, or you can select directly Excel here, it will start exporting the data to your local files. Okay, you can give your file name here and give the path information. You can start saving the file. This is how you export the data to the local files, right? Okay, now our data source is activated, and we check the data is also available here. Now let's go back to your SAP BW system. Okay, now we need to start getting the data from your SAP R/3 system into SAP BW by using your BW 3.5 navigation. So what is the transaction code for this? RSA1 old. So now you enter into the SAP BW 3.5 screen. Okay, so this is your administrator workbench, not data modeling. So we need to check, the first thing is your source system connectivity. Click on your source system, and which source system I need to check here? For R3 source system, right? So this is my R3 ECC client source system. Right click on it, say check. We are checking the connectivity in between the R3 system and your SAP BW system by doing this process. It's checking the connectivity in between these two systems. Now we got the information says the connection is okay for this in between the BW and R/3, right? So what is our next step here? We have a data source activated in our R/3 system, so we need to bring the data source data into our SAP BW3, right? So what we need to do for this, we have to replicate the data source, or you have to copy the data source to BW system. So what we have to do for this, so we need to double click on your SAP your source system here. This is my source system, ECC client. Now let's expand your SAP application component here. Need to expand the module here. What is our module here? Material management, right? Check it out where your material management is available. This is your SAP application components. This is my module here, and this is my data source. This is the data source which has been activated in your R/3 system. Here if it displays the plus symbol, the indicator plus here, it means that the data source is already assigned to an info source. In case if it is not assigned to any info source, it will display the minus indicator, right? So in case, just imagine here we are looking at the minus indicator. We got a minus indicator for this data source. So let's see that how we can assign this data source to any info source. Select your data source, context menu, right click on it, and you have an options called a replicate data source. If you say this one, it will replicate all the data sources from your module, but selected module. So how many data sources are available under this one particular module, material management? It will replicate all the data sources from this module, material management, into your BW system. In our case, which is not required for us. So what is our situation, our requirement here? We need to replicate only a particular data source called 2lis_02_s012. So we want to replicate only one individual data source here. We don't want to replicate all the data sources available in this particular module. So what is the options is available for me? Let's check it out. So cancel this option. Again, go back here. You need to enter the transaction code RSDS and press enter. So here it is going to ask you what is the data source you want to replicate. So what is my data source? 2lis_02_s012. And what is my source system here? My source system is ECC client. It will ask you which the source system you have to select. This is my source system. Select your source system here. Select your data source menu bar here, and you have options called replicate data source. Select this one. It will start replicating only this particular data source. Only one data source will be replicating. This is a way how you replicate only a particular data source from a module. For example, if your module contains hundreds of data sources, if you go back to your RSA1 world and right click on the data source and say replicate, it will replicate all the hundreds of data sources. So it is not required for you, right? Particularly I am working into one data source. I want to get the data only from this data source. This is my requirement. So what I need to do, I have to replicate only this particular data source. So the option is you have to enter the transaction code RSDS and enter the data source here and start clicking the data source menu bar and select replicate the data source. It will replicate only the one particular data source. Now let's go back to your RSA1 world and let's check it out, the data source. RSA1 old. Go back to your 3.5 the navigation method we are using, your 3.5 system screen. So now let's check it out, what is your data source is available or not. So now we need to check this source system and select your source system connectivity, and let's once again check it out, the connection here. Okay, so it is perfectly fine now. So what I need to do is you need to double click on this source system again and expand your SAP and expand your SAP application component and expand your module, whatever the module you have selected here. You can check it out, you will get the plus symbol here. So which in this situation it's already been activated. I have shown you. In case if it is not activated, you can see a minus symbol here. So how to replicate this one? You have to go to RSDS, enter this data source name, replicate there and come back here and check it out. You will get the plus symbol. Now let's double click on your data source. We have to assign the info source to this data source or data source to the info source, vice versa. So how to do that one? So here you have option called assign the data source, or you can go back here, right click on your the data source. So we don't have the option here for the assigning info source. So what is the other option? Double click on this, your data source, and you have option here info source menu. assign the source system. Then it will select automatically your info source here. And what is your source system here? R by 3 client, your ECC client. Click on transfer. So generally we have to get this into SAP BI content, but in our example, in the screen, since our data source is already activated, we're getting a little not displaying the proper windows. Let's do one thing. Let's select another data source, because this data source is already activated. Let me select one more data source which is not activated, so we can work with that. Okay, go back, go to your E3 system. This is your R by. Let's type the transaction code RSA5, press enter. I'm selecting a different data source because the earlier data source is already activated. We have used a different example or for different class. Okay, so we don't want this purchasing. Let's select a different one. Okay, let's select this 2LIS02 underscore ITM. This is a purchasing data item level. I'm going to select this data source. So let's check the version comparison here. There is no difference found between the versions, means it's already been activated. In case if it is not activated, you can always go and click on activate the data source, which will activate your. Okay, so in case if you want to check it out, the extract structure here, you can double click. These are the fields are available for this data source. So this is my data source and this is my extraction structure technical name. Go back. Now let's check it out, the data source entity in the metadata repository for your data sources. So what is the transaction code? RSA6, press enter. Okay, and expand your SAP R by 3 and MM module, and we have our purchasing item level data source here. Okay, or you have one more transaction code SBIW, press enter. Post processing, edit data source and expand R by 3, expand MM. You can check out your item level data. Press back. So let's check the data in the data source using your extractor checker RSA3, press enter. And what is my data source name? ITM. Execute. It shows there is no there is no data available here. It says 0 records selected. Let's select one more data source since it has no records. Go back to your RSA5. We need to select one more data source which has some records availability. Purchasing and these are purchasing groups and vendor evaluation. Okay, let's check it out whether the data is available in a purchasing groups or not. Check the version comparison. This is also activated. In case if it is not activated, you can activate here. You can check it out the structure by double clicking on it. This is the structure available. Now let's check the extraction checker here. This is your RSA3 and it is S011, I believe. 11, yes, press enter. Execute. Let's see whether it has some data or not. Yeah, it has some data. That's good. Let's work with this data source. Go back. Now let's go back to your SAP BW system. Okay, RSA 1 volt. your source system. Let's check the connectivity again. It's good. Double click on it. Expand SAP. Expand your application component. Expand your material management. So your data source is not available here, right? So what we need to do, we have to replicate the data source, right? So for this we have to enter the transaction code RSDS and my data source name 2 LIS02, it's 11, and source system is PC. Sorry, it's not PC, it's my ECC system. And we have to click on data source, say replicate the data source. It starts replicating the data source to LIS underscore 02 underscore S011 was replicated successfully. Okay, now check it out, your data source system, double click, expand your SAP, expand your material management. See, now my data source is available. Can you check it out? Earlier I was talking about the minus symbol, so now it's displaying the minus symbol. It means that minus indicator shows that it is not assigned to any info source, right? Okay, now we are on the right track. Let's move to the next step. So in the last time when we were checking about this, right click on context menu, we were not able to find out this assign info source because it has been already assigned to a particular info source. If you check it out, this the latest data source which we have replicated, right click, you can check it out, assign the info source here, right? This is what we're expecting for the previous data source, which is already, you know, we are assigned to some info sources. We are not able to work with this data source. That's the reason we have selected a new fresh data source from R3 system, and now we are on the right track. Let's work on this. So what is your data source? This is my data source and this is your source system, and this shows us this is an info source assignment. The content is again your data source name, right? It will show you your ECC client and client the number here. Okay, now let's click on the continue. We are assigning an info source to a data source. It's processing now. You can check it out. This, there are the new objects in level 2. It's working on. As we said in earlier, it's supposed to go to the BI content. Now it's reached to the BI content. Okay, now check it out, your grouping, it's supposed to be only a necessary objects, and the collection mode, is supposed to be collect automatically. Let's expand this little bit. It's easy for you to understand. Let's check it out. What are the info objects we have got along with this data source? These are the info objects we received. Okay, and I have again the data source and transfer structures. We can check it out, all the information here. Okay, let's move to install and activate this one. Let's click on install. In case if it gets failed, keep repeat the same step till it gets successful. It's activating the transfer routines. It's creating some structures here. Okay, let's see that it's got successfully installed. Now what we have to now the next step is going to be like we have to activate and install the relevant info cube from your business content. Okay, before that let's see whether it is activated in your data source. Earlier we have checked the minus indicator. Now you can check it out, the plus indicator. So it is actively available and it's indicate this assignment is completed. Right, click on this again, BI content. Now let's activate and install the relevant info cube from your business content. So we are doing this process by using update rules relationship. Okay, so select the object types and expand your update rules. Let's check it out where the update rules are available. It will be under 3.x. Now expand your update rules, double click on the select objects, and we need to find what is our data source here. Let's find out. 2 lis underscore 02 underscore s011. This is my data source which we have selected here, and this is my info cube here. You can check it out, 0 pur underscore c04. This is my info cube. Select the transfer selection. It's processing. Okay, let's check it out. Now select your info providers. Now let's click on find. It's reading the data. Okay, now click on the find and search the term. What is our info cube name? 0 pur underscore c04. Let's look for it. Okay, so this is my info cube now which is available. Just drag and drop under the collected objects. Okay, now it's moved. This 0 indicates that it's already active. Okay, select your info cube and click on the select source system assignment. Okay, my source system assignment is going to be my RR client, that is your ECC client. Okay, click on continue. Click on grouping and select only necessary objects and click on the installation, or you can check it out, this simulation installation install in background. We need to install this part right now. So what we have to do is select install here. It's installing. Now let's select your installation here. Click on modeling, then click on refresh. Now click on find. What is our info cube? 0 pur underscore c04. Find out. It's available here. Then click on continue. See, this is my info cube. My info cube is available now. You can double click on the info cube. Observe your info cube here. These are the dimensions they have created: cancellation rate, p-type, version, vendor, purchasing group, purchasing organization, and you can check it out. The info objects is assigned for the dimensions. This is my structure of info cube, which is already activated. The next step is going to be we are going to create the update rules for your info cube using the info source. For that, you need to select your info cube, right click from the context menu. You have to select the create update rules. Here you have an option data source. Under data source you have an info source here. What is my info source here? 2 alias 02 underscore S011. This is my info source for this, right? Once you enter the info source name here, you need to press the enter, continue. It will take you to the update rules and create rules information here. You need to click on activate. You can check it out, the status is inactive mode. Now we are activating this. The version is new. Now it will display active. Go back, press F3. You can check it out. This is your update rules. We call in SAP 7 BW 7.3. It's a we call it a transformation. You can observe here your update rules are available. The next step is going to be displaying the data flow. Select your info cube and say display or show the data flow. Okay, this is my ECC client and we have connected to the data source here. From the data source, this is my data source name, which is in a PSA. The data moved to the purchasing groups. From here it's going to the info cube. Okay, so we have initially we have taken two different data sources. First which is already activated. Again we have selected a new data source. It is a 2 LIS underscore 02 S011. So this is a present data source which is connected to my target called info cube. Close this. So till now here we have done this modeling and the modeling has been completed. The next topic is data extraction or loading. We have to load the data, right? So for that, what we have to do, we have to create the info package and load the data with the full update. Okay, let's select your info source, find your data source 02 2 LIS underscore 02 underscore S011. Find it out. This is your source. Check it out where it is available. Double click on your info source. It shows you the structure here. Go back. You can observe that if you expand it, you have your ECC client here. Right click on it and say create info package. Info package, enter some description. Info package for 2 LIS underscore 02 underscore S011 for purchasing groups. Select your data source and say save. Click on the processing tab. It will display the options to update the data. Now we have selected PSA and then into the data target. So first the data will be moved to PSA, then into the data targets package by package. If you click on this symbol here, it will display in a graphical user interface like a how the data will be moved. The data will be moved from your source system to PSA, from PSA to data target. This is an option which we have selected now, right? Close this. Let it be the default option PSA and then into a data targets, right? Click on the update. We need to update this data in a full, right? So this is what we discussed in the beginning of this example. We have to update the full load. And if you select the data targets, this is my data target. You can select this is your data target here. This is the info cube is your data target, right? Click on update. You can check it out. The data update type in the data targets always update the data even if no master data exists for the data, right? You have another option, do not update the data if no master data exists for the characteristics. Of course we have loaded the master data in the beginning of this example, but in case if the fields are not matching with this data source, so what we have to do, we need to select this first option, always update the data even if no master data exists for the data. Click on a schedule and click on start. Data was requested here. Check it out the data by clicking on monitor icon. You can check it out what are the data records has been available here. It shows the 0 records because still it is not activated. Click on refresh. The yellow symbol, it indicates that it is still under process. It's still not completed. You can refresh. You can check it out. Now we got the records 3461, but still it's not yet completed. It's taking a lot of time since, okay, now we got the green symbol here. So the data is successfully moved to your PSA. Let's check it out the data in a PSA by selecting the PSA maintenance icon. You can check it out the number of records, but I want to display only 1000 records here. Click on OK. This is the data, right? Go back. It's still reading because 1000 records has to be displayed here. Go back. Now let's check it out the data in the info queue. Double click again your info package, monitor icon, select your request, click on manage data targets, select your request tab. You can check it out how many records has been transferred and how many records added here. And this is my info cube. Click on contents, say OK. So what are the info objects you want to select it here? Select whichever you required. It's selected automatically all. Okay, execute. So this is the data in my info queue. So the data loading is completed. Go back. So we successfully completed moving or transferring the data, extracting the data from SAP R/3 into SAP BW. So we are using a BW 3.5 navigation method, and now the data is moved successfully. On top of your info cube, we can start creating a BEX reporting. Okay, thank you very much.